Jake Morrison's boarding pod slammed into the hull of the Zephyrian flagship with tremendous force. He was alone this time. The mission was too dangerous to risk other lives. The wooden staff glowed brighter than ever before as he cut through the enemy ship's outer wall. The moment Jake stepped inside the massive vessel, he felt the ancient code networks all around him. This ship was old, built on technology that went back thousands of years to when the Zephyrians first found architect ruins on their homeworld. "Computer, seal all corridors behind me," Jake whispered to his staff. Golden symbols flowed along the wood surface, and Jake heard metal doors slamming shut throughout the ship. Zephyrian soldiers were trapped in their quarters, while others found themselves locked out of important sections. Jake moved through the empty hallways like a ghost. The staff was guiding him toward the ship's computer core, showing him the fastest route while keeping enemies away from his path. Elder Zephyroon's voice boomed through the ship's speakers. "Intruder, you cannot hide from us. Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Instead of answering, Jake reached out through the ancient code and turned off the ship's artificial gravity. The effect was immediate. Sounds of confusion and panic echoed from sealed sections as Zephyrian crew members floated helplessly in zero gravity. "How are you doing this?" Elder Zephyroon demanded. Jake found the computer core deep in the ship's center. It was a vast room filled with crystal processors and energy conduits. At its heart sat a single black cube covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. "That's an architect processing unit," Jake realized. "The original core that all Zephyrian technology is built around." He approached the cube carefully and placed his staff against its surface. Immediately, visions flooded his mind. He saw the rise of the Zephyrian Empire, their discovery of ancient ruins, their gradual expansion across the galaxy. But he also saw something else: their fear. The Zephyrians had always known they were using technology they didn't fully understand. They lived in constant terror that someday someone would come along who could control the ancient systems better than they could. "You're afraid," Jake said aloud, knowing Elder Zephyroon could hear him through the ship's communications. "Your whole empire is built on borrowed power, and you know it." The flagship's bridge doors burst open, and Elder Zephyroon himself stomped into the computer core. He was 12 feet tall, covered in thick gray scales, with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. His species had evolved from predators, and it showed. "Give me the artifact, human," the alien commander growled. "It belongs to those strong enough to use it." Jake stood his ground, staff in hand. "The architects didn't make these tools for conquerors. They made them for protectors." Elder Zephyrin laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "The weak deserve to be ruled by the strong. That is the natural order." "No," Jake replied, and his staff blazed with golden light. "That's the old way. The architects died to give us a better choice." Through the ancient code networks, Jake reached out to every Zephyrian ship in the fleet, not to damage them or shut them down, but to speak directly to their crews. The staff translated his words into their language and broadcast them throughout their empire. "People of the Zephyrian worlds," Jake said, his voice carrying across space through quantum communication networks. "Your leaders have lied to you. The technology that powers your civilization was never yours. It belongs to all thinking beings, meant to be shared, not hoarded." Jake showed them the truth through the ancient code, how the architects had intended their gifts to bring species together, not drive them apart. He revealed the location of architect sites throughout Zephyrian space, knowledge that had been kept secret by the ruling class for generations. Elder Zephyroon roared and charged forward, but Jake was ready. The staff pulsed, and the ship's own defense systems turned against its commander. Energy beams designed to repel boarders struck the Elder from multiple angles. "Your own ship recognizes that you're not worthy to command it," Jake said sadly. "The architects built loyalty to justice into every system, not loyalty to power." Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Ship commanders found their crews questioning orders. Soldiers laid down weapons that suddenly felt too heavy to lift. The ancient code was showing everyone the difference between strength used to protect and strength used to destroy. President Julia Hayes's voice came through Jake's communication device. "Sergeant Morrison, we're receiving surrender signals from 70% of the Zephyrian fleet. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Jake felt the staff's power flowing through him. but also felt it changing him. He understood now why his ancestors had carried it, but never spoken of its true nature. Using architect technology came with a price. It connected you to the consciousness of an entire extinct civilization. "I can end this war," Jake told Elder Zephrun, who was slowly getting back to his feet. "But only if you're willing to accept that there's a better way than conquest." The alien commander stared at Jake with hatred and fear in his eyes. "You would spare us? After all we have done?" "That's what makes humans different," Jake replied. "We believe in second chances." Over the following hours, a peace treaty was negotiated. The Zephyrian Empire agreed to release all conquered worlds and share architect technology with other species. In return, humanity would establish the Human Architect Corps to teach others how to use the ancient tools safely. Jake returned to the USS Defiance as a hero, but he felt the weight of his new responsibility. The staff had changed him permanently. He could now sense architect networks across the galaxy, and other humans were beginning to show similar abilities. Major Chris Thompson, one of the Marines who had awakened during the battle, approached Jake in the ship's corridor. "So what happens now? Do we become galactic peacekeepers?" Jake looked at the wooden staff in his hands. The symbols were dim now, but he could still feel the ancient consciousness within it. "I think that's exactly what we become. The architects left us these tools for a reason." Dr. Kate Mitchell joined them, carrying reports from across known space. "We're getting signals from dozens of worlds. Ancient sites are activating everywhere. It's like the galaxy is waking up after millions of years of sleep." Through the ship's windows, Jake could see human exploration vessels preparing to launch toward distant stars. The war was over, but humanity's real journey was just beginning. On Earth, children were already learning to interface with architect technology that had been hidden in museums and private collections for centuries. What had seemed like primitive art and ancient sculptures were revealing themselves as sophisticated tools waiting for the right minds to activate them. Jake thought about his great-great-grandfather, who had carved this staff from an oak tree, back on Earth. The old man probably never knew that he was working with wood that had grown around an architect artifact buried in the soil for millions of years. "The stick that everyone laughed at saved the human race," Major Thompson observed. Jake smiled and ran his fingers along the wooden surface. The staff felt warm and alive, like it was happy to finally fulfill its true purpose. "It was never about the stick," he replied. "It was about remembering that sometimes the most powerful things come in the simplest packages." As the USS Defiance headed home to Earth, Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck watching the stars. In his hands, he held a piece of wood that had ended an interstellar war and opened the galaxy to a new age of cooperation. The architects were gone, but their dream lived on. And humanity, once considered primitive by advanced civilizations, had become the guardians of ancient wisdom and the protectors of galactic peace. The wooden staff pulsed gently, and Jake heard something like a whisper of gratitude from across the ages. The children of Earth had finally come home to their destiny among the stars. The USS Defiance shook as Zephyrian plasma cannons hit its shields. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge holding his glowing staff while chaos erupted around him. Captain Pete Williams was shouting orders, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. "Shields down to 60%, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Lopez from her position at the tactical station. "Return fire," Captain Williams ordered. "All batteries focus on their lead dreadnought." The Coalition fleet's weapons struck the massive Zephyrian warship, but their energy beams barely scratched its armor. The enemy vessel was 3 times larger than any human ship, with weapons that could destroy a city. "Captain, their shields are too strong," Sarah reported. "Our weapons aren't getting through." Jake watched the battle through the main view screen and felt the staff pulling at his mind. The ancient artifact was trying to show him something, but the images were confusing and overwhelming. "Sergeant Morrison," Admiral Brooks called out from across the bridge. "Can you use that thing to help us?" Jake closed his eyes and let the staff guide his thoughts. Suddenly, he understood what it wanted him to do. "I need to connect it to the ship's computer system." Chief Engineer Ryan Parker looked up from a damage report. "Connect wood to our computers? That's impossible." "Not wood," Jake replied. "This is architect technology. It can interface with any system based on their designs." Dr. Price rushed over with a strange device in his hands. This is a neural interface adapter. It might let you link your brain to the ship's systems through the staff. Jake took the device and placed it on his forehead. Wires ran from it to a connection port on the bridge's main console. When he touched the staff to the adapter, golden light flowed through the wires into the ship's computers. Immediately, Jake felt his consciousness expand. He could sense every system on the USS. Defiance, the engines, weapons, shields, life support. But more than that, he could feel the ancient code that underlied all of it. "My God," he whispered. "Everything we built, everything everyone in the galaxy built, it's all connected. The architects designed it that way." Through the staff, Jake reached out toward the attacking Zephyrian ships. Their technology was more advanced than human systems, but it was still based on the same ancient foundations, and those foundations recognized Jake's authority. "I can see their ships," he told Captain Williams. "Not just see them, I can speak to them through the ancient code." Jake focused his mind on the lead Zephyrian dreadnought. The massive warship's computer systems were incredibly complex, but at their core lay simple architect programming that was millions of years old. Jake found those core programs and began changing them. "What are you doing?" Admiral Brooks asked. "Telling their weapons to stop working," Jake replied. On the view screen, the Zephyrian dreadnought's main guns flickered and went silent. Alarm lights flashed across its hull as system after system failed. The massive ship began drifting helplessly. "Impossible," Captain Williams breathed. "You shut down their entire vessel?" Jake shook his head. "Not shut down. I'm just speaking to it in a language that's older than their empire. Their computers have to listen. But using the staff was like trying to drink from a fire hose." Information flooded Jake's mind faster than he could process it. He saw the location of every artifact in the galaxy. He understood how hyperspace worked, how gravity shields functioned, how matter itself could be manipulated at the quantum level. "Jake, your nose is bleeding," Dr. Price said with concern. Jake wiped the blood away with his free hand. The neural interface was pushing his brain to its limits, but he couldn't stop now. The entire Zephyrian fleet was moving to surround the coalition forces. He reached out to more enemy ships, speaking to their ancient core programming. One by one, their weapons went silent, and their engines failed. But each connection made Jake's head pound with pain. "There are too many," he gasped. "I can't reach them all." "Then focus on their flagship," Admiral Brooks suggested. "Take out their command ship and the rest might retreat." Jake searched for the largest Zephyrian vessel and found it hanging back behind the main fleet. It was enormous, easily 5 times the size of any coalition ship, but when he tried to connect to its systems, something pushed back. "They have defenses," he realized. "The flagship is shielded against this kind of attack." Through the staff, Jake felt other human minds awakening. Across the fleet, coalition ships had emergency neural interface kits, and other Marines were trying to connect with architect artifacts they carried as family heirlooms. "I'm getting reports from other vessels," Sarah Lopez announced. "The USS Intrepid says their weapons systems just got a massive power boost. The UCS Ranger reports their shields are operating at 150% efficiency." Jake smiled despite his headache. Humanity was learning to use the ancient technology, and it was making them stronger than ever before. But the Zephyrian flagship was still a problem. Its commander, Elder Zephrun, was broadcasting surrender demands to the coalition fleet. "This is your final warning," the alien's voice came through the communication system. "Return our stolen technology or face complete destruction." Jake realized that the Zephyrians knew humanity had found something important. They weren't just trying to win a battle anymore. They were trying to capture the key to controlling all galactic technology. Through the neural link, Jake felt the staff showing him something new. Deep in the ship's computer banks were charts leading to Earth itself. The planet wasn't just humanity's homeworld. It was built on top of the largest architect facility in the galaxy. "Captain," Jake said urgently, "we need to warn Earth. The Zephyrians will go there next if we don't stop them here." "How do we stop a flagship that's immune to your staff?" Captain Williams asked. Jake studied the massive enemy vessel through the ancient code networks. Its defenses were strong, but they weren't perfect. The architect systems at the ship's core were still accessible. He just needed to get closer. "I need to board it," Jake realized. The staff works better at close range. If I can get to their computer core, I can shut them down from the inside. Admiral Brooks shook his head. That's suicide. You'd have to fight through their entire crew. Not fight, Jake replied, understanding dawning in his mind. I can turn their own ship against them. Make their corridors seal, their lights go out. Their life support systems lock them in place. The staff pulsed with approval. This was what it had been designed for. Not just to control technology, but to protect the innocent from those who would abuse power. Get me a boarding pod, Jake said, and anyone else who can use architect artifacts. It's time to end this war. As Jake prepared for what might be his final mission, he felt the weight of millions of years of history on his shoulders. The architects had died to give future races the tools they needed to survive. Now it was up to humanity to prove they were worthy of that gift. The wooden staff hummed with power in his hands, ready to face the most dangerous challenge yet. Soon, Jake Morrison would learn if one human with an ancient artifact could defeat an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. The fate of Earth itself hung in the balance. Dr. Alan Price's laboratory was the most advanced science facility on the USS Defiance. Jake Morrison sat on a metal chair while the scientist pointed different scanners at his wooden staff. Dr. Kate Mitchell, the Coalition's best language expert, stood nearby taking notes on a tablet computer. The readings are incredible, Dr. Price said, shaking his gray head in amazement. This wood contains crystal structures that shouldn't exist in any organic material. The patterns run all the way through, like someone grew the tree around a computer circuit. Dr. Mitchell looked up from her tablet. And these symbols that appeared during combat. Can you make them show up again? Jake held the staff in both hands and tried to remember how he felt during the fight. Nothing happened. The wood looked completely normal. It only worked when I was in danger, he said. Maybe it needs some kind of trigger. Or maybe it responds. To adrenaline, Dr. Price suggested. Your stress hormones during combat could have activated it. Admiral Sam Brooks entered the laboratory. He was a tall man with silver hair and hard eyes. Behind him walked Ambassador Trixall, one of the few Altarians serving with the Coalition fleet. The alien looked like a humanoid bird with feathers, instead of hair and large golden eyes. Dr. Price, what have you found? The Admiral asked. Something that could change everything, sir. This staff contains technology we've never seen before. When Sergeant Morrison activated it, it disrupted Zephyrian systems on a fundamental level. Ambassador Trixall stepped closer to examine the staff, her feathers ruffled with what Jake recognized as excitement. May I touch it? She asked in her musical voice. Jake handed her the staff. The ambassador ran her thin fingers along the wood surface, then suddenly jerked her hands back as if she'd been shocked. Impossible, she whispered. This carries the mark of the first builders. Everyone in the room went quiet. Jake had never heard that term before, but Dr. Mitchell was already typing notes frantically. The first builders? Admiral Brooks asked. Ancient? Myths among my people speak of a race that came before all others. They built the first star gates, created the first energy weapons, then vanished millions of years ago. We call them the architects of the galaxy. Dr. Price leaned forward. Are you saying this staff is millions of years old? The wood is from Earth, Ambassador Trixall replied. But the patterns within it, those are far older. Someone carved this staff around an architect artifact. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. His great-great-grandfather had found the wood in a forest, but what if there had been something already there? Something buried under the ground for countless ages? Let me try something, Dr. Mitchell said. She pulled up holographic displays, showing different alien languages. Sergeant Morrison, hold the staff and look at these symbols. Tell me if any of them seem familiar. Jake took the staff back and studied the floating letters. Most meant nothing to him. But when Dr. Mitchell showed him a section of very old Altarian text, something clicked in his mind. The staff grew warm in his hands. Golden symbols appeared, along its length, pulsing gently. And suddenly, Jake could understand the ancient writing floating in front of him. It says, "When the children of Earth awaken, the old roads will open again," he read aloud. Everyone stared at him. Jake stared back, equally shocked. He had never learned Altarian, and definitely not the ancient form of it. How did you know that? Dr. Mitchell asked. I don't know. The staff, It's like it's teaching me. Ambassador Trixal's feathers were standing up now. In our oldest stories, the architects left tools behind for those who would come after them, but these tools would only work for beings with the right kind of mind. What kind of mind? Admiral Brooks asked. Before the ambassador could answer, Jake gasped. Images were flowing into his head through the staff. He saw star maps showing hyperspace routes that connected every part of the galaxy. He saw massive ships built by creatures he had never seen before. And he saw a war that had raged across space millions of years ago. They were called the Architects, Jake said, his voice strange and distant. They built everything. All the technology we use, all the weapons, all the stargates, it's all based on their designs. But they were dying out, and they knew other races would find their ruins and copy their work. The visions continued. Jake saw the Architects, placing artifacts in hidden locations across the galaxy. They were creating a fail-safe, something that could only be activated by a species that thought the right way. They were looking for a race that could adapt and survive, but also one that would protect others instead of conquering them. They watched many species rise and fall, waiting for the right one to appear. And they chose humanity? Dr. Price asked. Jake nodded slowly. Not chose exactly, but humans developed in a way that matched what they were looking for. Our brains work differently than other species. We can form connections that activate their technology. The staff pulsed brighter, and more information flowed through Jake's mind. He learned that every piece of advanced technology in the galaxy was built on architect foundations. The Zephyrians didn't know it, but their weapons and ships all contained traces of ancient programming code. That's why the staff disrupted their systems, Jake realized. It can speak to the original code that everything else is built on. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain Pete Williams's voice came over the speakers. All hands to battle stations. Zephyrian fleet is moving to attack formation. This is not a drill. Admiral Brooks turned to Jake. Sergeant, I need to know. Can you do what happened on that supply ship again? Jake looked at the staff in his hands. The golden symbols were still glowing, and he could feel power flowing through the ancient wood. But using it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. He didn't know what would happen if he fell off. I think so, sir. But I don't understand how it works yet. Then you'd better learn fast. The fate of humanity might depend on it. As they rushed toward the bridge, Jake caught Ambassador Trixal's arm. These architects, what happened to them? The alien looked sad. According to our myths, they used up all their life force to create the artifacts. They died so that future races could have the tools to survive and grow. Jake felt the weight of that sacrifice as they reached the bridge. Through the main view screen, he could see the massive Zephyrian fleet approaching. Hundreds of warships bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. But in his hands, Jake held something that predated all of their technology, something that might give humanity its first real advantage in this war. The staff pulsed warmly, and Jake heard something like a whisper in his mind. The time of waiting is over. The children of Earth must choose their path. As the first enemy, weapons began firing. Jake Morrison realized that his family's simple wooden staff was about to change the course of galactic history. The only question was whether humanity was ready for what came next. The boarding pod shook as it flew through space toward the Zephyrian supply ship. Jake Morrison sat with 11 other Marines in the cramped metal tube. His plasma rifle was locked between his knees, and his wooden staff was clipped to his armor's side. Colonel Amy Rodriguez sat across from him. She was the Marine commander for this mission, a tough woman with scars on her face from previous battles. Remember, people, this is a grab-and-go operation. We take the ship, download their navigation data, and get out before their escorts arrive. Lieutenant Ben Carter, Jake's squad leader and best friend, checked his weapon for the third time. Intel says the ship has light defenses, maybe 20 Zephyrian soldiers. Intel has been wrong before, Colonel Rodriguez replied. Stay sharp. The pod's pilot announced over the radio. 60 seconds to contact, their shields are down thanks to the jamming array. Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was his first real combat mission against the Zephyrians. He had fought pirates and rebel groups before, but never the Empire's trained soldiers. The Zephyrians were 8 feet tall, had natural armor plating, and reflexes twice as fast as humans. 30 seconds, the pilot called out. Jake touched his wooden staff through his armor. The familiar weight made him feel calmer. His grandfather had told him stories about carrying it into battle. "It's not about the weapon," the old man had said. "It's about remembering who you are." 10 seconds. Brace for impact. The pod slammed into the Zephyrian ship's hull with a loud crash. Cutting charges exploded, burning a hole through the metal. Red lights flashed as the pod's front opened. "Go! Go! Go!" Colonel Rodriguez shouted. The Marines poured through the hole into the enemy ship. Jake followed Lieutenant Carter down a narrow corridor filled with strange purple light. The walls were covered in Zephyrian writing that looked like twisted metal symbols. They moved quickly through the ship's maze-like interior. Everything was built for creatures much taller than humans. Jake had to duck under doorways and stretch to reach control panels. The first Zephyrian soldiers appeared around a corner ahead. They were huge, covered in gray scales that looked like natural armor. Their weapons were long energy rifles that glowed blue at the tips. "Contact front!" Lieutenant Carter yelled. The firefight started immediately. Blue energy beams flew down the corridor while the Marines returned fire with red plasma bolts. Jake pressed himself against a wall and aimed his rifle around the corner. His first shot hit a Zephyrian in the chest. The alien soldier stumbled but didn't fall. Their natural armor was incredibly strong. Jake fired again, and this time the enemy went down. The Marines pushed forward, fighting their way through the ship room by room. Jake's squad was assigned to secure the engine room, while the others went after the navigation computer. They found the engine room after 10 minutes of fighting. It was a huge space filled with glowing crystals and humming machinery. 3 Zephyrian engineers were working at control panels when the Marines burst in. The aliens reached for weapons, but Lieutenant Carter shot first. 2 of them fell immediately. The third dove behind a large piece of equipment. Jake moved to flank the hidden enemy. As he crept around the machinery, his plasma rifle suddenly sparked and went dead. A Zephyrian energy blast had hit it at just the right angle, frying the internal circuits. The alien soldier saw Jake's weapon was broken and stood up with a victory roar. He raised his energy rifle, ready to finish off the defenseless human. Jake had no time to think. He grabbed his wooden staff from his armor and swung it like a club. He expected to hit the Zephyrian and maybe buy himself a few seconds to run. Instead, something impossible happened. The moment Jake's hands gripped the staff in a fighting position, symbols along its length suddenly blazed with golden light. The wood felt warm, then hot, then like it was alive and pulsing with energy. A deep humming sound filled the air. The Zephyrian soldier stopped moving, his eyes wide with surprise. His energy rifle flickered and went dead in his hands. All around the engine room, the alien machinery began to malfunction. Lights dimmed, crystals stopped glowing, and control panels showed error messages in Zephyrian text. Jake stared at his staff in shock. The wooden surface was covered in glowing symbols that definitely weren't natural wood grain. They pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and he could feel power flowing through them like electricity. The Zephyrian soldier dropped his useless weapon and ran from the room in panic. "Jake! What the hell was that?" Lieutenant Carter shouted over the humming sound. "I don't know," Jake replied honestly. The staff was still glowing, but the light was getting dimmer. The humming faded to a whisper. The engine room's machinery slowly came back online as the strange effect ended. But several control panels were still showing error messages, and some of the crystals had cracks in them. "Whatever you did, it worked," Carter said. "Their systems are damaged. This ship won't be going anywhere fast." Jake stared at the staff in his hands. The symbols were gone now, looking like ordinary wood grain again, but he could still feel a faint warmth in the wood, like embers from a dying fire. "Morrison, Rodriguez here," the colonel's voice came through his radio. "Report your status. Engine room secure, ma'am. We had some kind of equipment malfunction that helped us out." "Copy that. We got the navigation data. All teams fall back to the boarding pod in 5 minutes." Jake clipped the staff back to his armor with shaking hands. His mind was racing with questions. What had just happened? Why was his family's old staff doing impossible things? And why did touching it feel like coming home after a long journey? Lieutenant Carter grabbed his shoulder. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Jake lied. "Let's get out of here." They fought their way back through the ship, meeting up with the other teams at the boarding pod. The mission was a complete success. They had the Zephyrian navigation data and had disabled an enemy supply ship. But as their pod flew back toward the USS Defiance, Jake couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. The staff had definitely done something to the alien technology. The symbols had been real, and the power he felt was real too. Dr. Alan Price was waiting when they returned to the ship. I heard there was some kind of energy discharge during your mission. Do you know what caused it? Jake looked at the wooden staff in his hands. The scientist's eyes were sharp and curious behind his glasses. I'm not sure, Doc, but I think you might want to run those tests on my staff after all. Dr. Price smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Something tells me we're about to discover something very important. Jake nodded, but he was thinking about more than just scientific tests. For 150 years, Morris and men had carried this staff into battle. Had they all experienced what he just did? And if so, why had no one ever talked about it? The answers would have to wait. Outside the ship's windows, more Zephyrian vessels were approaching, and the real battle was about to begin. But Jake no longer felt like he was carrying just a piece of wood. He was carrying something that could change the entire war. Jake Morrison walked down the metal hallway of the USS Defiance with his gear bag over his shoulder. The massive warship hummed around him as thousands of crew members prepared for what might be their final battle. The year was 2387, and humanity was losing the war. The wooden staff in his left hand felt warm against his palm. It was old, passed down through 5 generations of his family. His great-great-grandfather had carved it from oak trees back on Earth. The wood was dark brown now, worn smooth by decades of handling. Strange patterns ran along its length, but Jake had always thought they were just natural grain in the wood. "Hey, Morrison, what's that?" called out Corporal Danny Hayes from behind him. Danny was carrying a plasma rifle, 2 energy grenades, and a personal shield generator. Like every other Marine on the ship, he was loaded with the best weapons the Coalition could build. Jake turned around. "It's my staff, family tradition." Danny started laughing. "You brought a stick to a plasma war? Are you crazy?" Other Marines in the hallway stopped to look. Soon, a small crowd gathered around Jake. They all carried advanced weapons that could cut through steel or blast holes in starship hulls. Their armor could stop energy beams and projectile rounds. They looked at Jake's simple wooden staff like it was a joke. "That thing won't even scratch Zephyrian armor," said Private Lisa Woods, shaking her head. "You need real weapons out there." "The Zephyrians have energy shields that can stop anything we throw at them," added Sergeant Bob Kelly. "What's a piece of wood going to do?" Jake felt his face getting hot. He had known this would happen. Every time he brought the staff somewhere, people made fun of it. But it was important to him. His grandfather had carried it in the Mars colony, wars. His father had it during the First Contact conflicts. Now it was his turn. "It's not just a stick," Jake said quietly. "It means something to my family." "Meaning won't stop a plasma bolt," Danny replied. "You'll get yourself killed carrying that thing around." Commander Lisa Grant walked up to the group. She was the ship's tactical officer, a woman in her 30s with short black hair and sharp eyes. The Marines stood at attention when they saw her. "What's the problem here?" she asked. "Morrison brought a wooden stick instead of proper weapons." "Ma'am," Danny reported. Commander Grant looked at the staff in Jake's hand. Her eyebrows went up. "Sergeant Morrison, are you planning to take that into combat?" "Yes, ma'am, along with my regular gear." "That's not standard equipment. It could get in your way during a firefight." Jake's jaw tightened. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Go ahead. This staff has been with my family for over 100 years. Morrison men have carried it through every war. I'm not leaving it behind now." Commander Grant studied him for a long moment. Behind her, Dr. Alan Price approached the group. He was the ship's weapons specialist and alien technology expert. His gray hair was messy, and his lab coat had stains on it from working with dangerous chemicals. "Interesting wood grain," Dr. Price said, looking at Jake's staff. "May I examine it?" Jake hesitated, then held out the staff. Dr. Price took it carefully and ran his fingers along the surface. His eyes widened slightly. "This is unusual. The patterns look almost geometric, like they were designed instead of grown naturally." "It's just old wood, Doc," Jake said. Dr. Price handed the staff back. "Perhaps, but I'd be curious to run some." Tests on it later if you don't mind. We have bigger problems than old sticks, Commander Grant said. The Zephyrian fleet just dropped out of hyperspace, 300 ships against our 96. The Marines went quiet. Everyone knew the odds weren't good. The Zephyrian Empire had better weapons, stronger shields, and faster ships. Their energy, weapons could punch through coalition armor like it was paper. Their shields could absorb massive amounts of damage before failing. All Marines report to battle stations, Commander Grant announced. We launch boarding pods in 2 hours. The group broke up as everyone hurried to get ready. Jake walked toward his quarters to put on his combat armor. Danny caught up with him. Look, Jake, I'm sorry about the jokes. It's just, we're all scared. The Zephyrians have never lost a major battle. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Jake nodded. He understood. Fear made people say things they normally wouldn't. It's okay. I know how it looks. Why don't you just leave the stick in your room? You'll have your hands full with real weapons. Jake looked down at the staff. In the bright lights of the ship's corridor, the wood patterns seemed to shift slightly, like shadows moving under the surface. But that had to be his imagination. I can't explain it, Danny. But I need to take it with me. Something tells me it might be important. Danny shrugged. Your choice. But don't blame me when the squad leader makes you carry extra ammo because of the space it takes up. Jake reached his quarters and started putting on his armor. The Coalition had given humanity the best protection they could build. Energy-resistant plates, environmental seals, and built-in medical systems. His plasma rifle was top of the line, with enough power to take down a Zephyrian soldier in 2 shots. But as he strapped on his gear, Jake kept looking at the wooden staff leaning against his wall. His great-great-grandfather had carved it by hand over 150 years ago. Every Morrison man since then had carried it into battle. None of them had ever explained why, except to say it was family duty. Jake picked up the staff and clipped it to his armor's equipment harness. It felt right there, like it belonged. The weight was familiar and comforting. An alarm sounded through the ship. Captain Pete Williams's voice came over the speakers. All hands to battle stations. Zephyrian dreadnoughts are moving into attack formation. Marines prepare for boarding operations. Jake grabbed his helmet and headed for the door. In a few hours, he would find out if his family's old tradition would help him survive the most dangerous battle in human history. The wooden staff bumped against his leg as he walked. For just a moment, he could have sworn he felt it pulse like a heartbeat. But plasma cannons were already firing outside the ship, and there was no time to think about impossible things. The war was about to begin, and Jake Morrison was carrying a stick into the fight of his life.